All right, it is the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Gimel and Page Freezer webinar, Managing Online Data to Streamline eDiscovery. We appreciate you all being here, and first, I'd like to take a second and introduce myself. My name is Matthew Deedon, and I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Gimel, and I am joined by our key speaker today, the Strategic Channel Partner Manager at Page Freezer, Gabby Kalau.
Hi, Matthew. Hi, everybody.
So, quick introduction. Gabby was once a political aide in the British Columbia government. He is now a strategic partner manager with Page Freezer Software. His career in stakeholder relations spans 15 years across internet technology and government communications, bringing him unique insights to where the two will intersect and have unexpected consequences. Drawing from his experiences in both public sector and in technology, Gabby provides insights that help organizations keep pace with the rapid changes in technology and its impact on their communication strategies. Gabby, I hope I got that all correct.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you did.
So for those that aren't familiar with Page Freezer is a leading provider of website, social media, mobile text, and enterprise collaboration record-keeping solutions to both the public and private sectors. Page Freezer is a SaaS application that lets organizations of all sizes monitor dynamic online data sources like websites and social media accounts and permanently preserve content in defensible formats. So we really use Page Freezer to replay archived data as if it's live, revealing deleted and edited comments or for litigation and regulatory compliance. So before we get started, on the next slide, I would like to go through a few housekeeping items. We will be having a live Q&A after today's session, so please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar, and at the end, we will answer as many of those questions as we can get to. And if you have any technical difficulties, please send us a message and let us know by using that little chat icon at the bottom of your screen there, so we can help you solve any issues that you might be having. So with that, I'm going to give a quick introduction into Gimel for those that may not be familiar. Gimel is a records management software company that was founded in 2002, and we have a service team and global network of partners that have been delivering solutions with us for more than 17 years. Our primary technology partners are Microsoft and SAP, and our implementation partners include small specialty SIs with specific areas of expertise, as well as large global SIs and consultants like PwC and Lockheed Martin. And with over 500,000 licensed users and growing, we really do have a strong community of some of the best clients in the world. On the next slide, I kind of want to talk about what really differentiates Gimel from the rest of the market. At the heart of it, we really do believe that organizations deserve to spend time on what really matters to them by simplifying the management of information, by taking that burden away from the organization, letting them focus on their core business, and we will focus on managing the information. So really our technology stack on the left-hand side there, it's innovative. It's a cloud platform that's built on Microsoft Azure. It really does automate the entire content lifecycle from content creation and ingestion all the way to archiving and disposition. Our technology stack really automates that entire lifecycle. And it is web-based because it is built on Microsoft Azure. It can work in private cloud, hosted cloud. It can work on any major web browser. It works on mobile devices. It really does allow you to access your critical business information from any device, anywhere, at any time. And as I spoke on the earlier slide, we are certified with Microsoft and SAP, but we're also trusted members of a lot of industry associations like AIM, like ASUG. We're part of Microsoft's Content Services Partner Program, and our solution is DoD 5015 certified. As I spoke also earlier, proven, we're global, we have a lot of end users, and we really do serve every major industry. So with that very quick Gimel and Page Freezer introduction, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to our key speaker today so he can begin his in-depth presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Gimel team, for hosting us today. Today, I will be talking about how to manage your online data in order to streamline, as the title was, to streamline your eDiscovery experience. Now, have you ever tried to look for something when you didn't know where it was, or maybe you have a junk drawer that you put everything in? For many organizations and their collection departments, this is the state of at least some of their digital records, in particular when it comes to their online presence. And when required, how does anybody capture data they need from the World Wide Web? For a lot of clients that I've spoken to, the answer seems to be the screenshot. While this may seem to be an easy workaround at first, it eventually starts taking up time and expense. And these days, it's not even guaranteed to be an acceptable form of proof in the court of law. There was a time when the only data you needed to collect in response to discovery requests was emails and documents. Even if you received or sent work emails from your phone, this data would be located on a corporate server, and no data would need to be collected directly from your phone. No computer forensic experts were ever needed. These days, business is done with smartphones, social media, over instant messages and websites. Communications are spread over a number of digital sources, and as a result, responding to e-discovery requests has become increasingly challenging because the data now resides in apps and online. In fact, as you see here, nearly half of millennials prefer to collaborate through new forms of communication. So now we have to ask ourselves, why then are most of our records primarily from email? Well, what are we to do with all this information? For starters, we begin by planning ahead. And there's a reason why Ben Franklin's on the $100 bill. This man knew how to save money. And in litigation and e-discovery, that ounce of prevention can go a long way in streamlining how your company saves dollars and saves time. Now, when it comes to litigation discovery, that ounce of prevention for an organization's litigation process typically begins with an early case assessment. And this is simply when everyone asks, is it worth it? The challenging part at this stage is trying to make a go or no-go decision based on the best available knowledge. And during the early case assessment, one of the exercises is usually to evaluate the available evidence and best information, sometimes using the just 10 best pieces of evidence available, and seeing if that can frame an argument or a narrative. Right? They're often trying to use limited evidence to justify a full story. And primarily, obviously they can't do that, but they're looking for themes so that they can quickly decide, your legal teams can quickly decide how to put together a strong narrative and do it quickly without spending too much money. Within the evidence, they'll use it to build a narrative to tailor the case and find a trend, hopefully that helps them establish a winning story. Now, the problem with ECAs is that they factor in the cost of discovery into their equations. They may decide on settling a case because the cost of discovery is too large or because getting the information is simply too difficult. And sometimes the best available data may not be the best available data at all. Think about that. The legal teams in your organizations are making what could be company-altering decisions based on the quality of available data. This means that your data quality matters. A good decision will be based on what you can gather quickly. Now, hopefully, you're all familiar with this e-discovery model. The e-discovery process often is focused, when we talk about e-discovery, most of the time we're really focused on what's going on the right-hand side of this slide with the process, review, analysis, and presentation. What's often left out is the importance of the left side: preserve, collect, identify. And, because let's not kid ourselves here, this is often left to be the organization's responsibility, despite paying a lot of money into an e-discovery process or tool. So the first key, we pay a lot for e-discovery process and review, but this is also just an algorithm. And like every good algorithm, garbage in means garbage out. So the more time you spend on gathering information, it may lessen the expense on what you have for review, as long as it's quality information. So the first key to streamlining your e-discovery begins with having good collections. I know this is easier said than done, but collecting electronic evidence poses several challenges, some of which include the unmanageable volumes of information that we have. And these volumes lead to lengthy review times and resources to meet ever increasingly tight deadlines. And to meet those deadlines, many of us hire expensive hourly consultants. I've heard of rates of up to $2,000 an hour in some cases to get just collections done. And even those consultants may not be familiar with the newest type of the data source. And even so, when they do, there may be data gaps because they're not familiar with your data specifically, and there are technical glitches. And after all this, oftentimes, the legal team or courts still reject the evidence for lack of authenticity, chain of custody, relevance, etc. And this always creates tension with how much time do you spend collecting versus how much money do you want to save on the e-discovery review process. Most typical practices for collecting electronic data are resource intensive. You've got armies of litigation, support, scrambling for information, consultants charging exorbitant fees to comb through your data, or if you're requesting data directly from platforms, they'll provide it in unusable formats 2 or 3 months later, and you still don't necessarily know what you're looking for. Now, the better thing to do, and one of our suggestions, and I'm sure a lot of people who are familiar with GIML practice a lot of this already, I hope, is first to invest in good quality record keeping. This means people and good quality tools. There are several quality records management tools and archives out there that can manage your data, and so you can have it ready at a moment's notice. And ensure your records management staff are well trained on these systems for record keeping, because they can all be very different, and also have a system internally of how you want to archive and store your records. So good tools will always have user-friendly search. I've seen a lot of tools out there that look like you're still combing through a Microsoft Access database, or look like a glorified Excel sheet. Why spend time trying to navigate a database when modern search technology should be able to speed up your data retrieval? And lastly, really important in saving time is following standards. This is super important because data moves. It doesn't just stay, once you collect data, it doesn't just stay in your archives or in your records management tool. It's going to be needed at some point. And when it leaves those tools, it needs to be used by other people, your legal teams, the courts, the opposing counsel. And if the data formats are proprietary to your records archive, then it's going to be hard for others to read it. So I recommend following standards set forth by the National Archive and Records Administration and the American Institute for Information Management for delivery and export standards. And lastly, we want to make sure that you have a process for managing your data's life cycle. At PageFreezer, we recommend something like this. At each stage, you should be able to identify the relevant tools and people necessary in the process from capture and maintenance through its actual use and then disposal. Now, the other part of managing online data is the online part. Here's a sampling of thought of how online is impacting business today. Okay. So let's revisit that data in a minute from that image earlier. Your organization likely already has a YouTube account, uses some form of messaging, a video like Skype, probably has an Instagram or Facebook page. most of the data in this example on this pie is largely external. What's hard to quantify, though, is that the rest of this, that a lot of this data comes from business as well. If you think about how your desk used to look like, how somebody's desk used to look like 20 years ago, now it's really clear. And a lot of the physical tools we had on our desktops have been replaced by apps. So this is all to say that a lot of our business activities, in addition to communication, are done online. And according to a 2018 survey by Deloitte, the use of new business communications is just going to continue increasing. Online collaboration platforms are rapidly replacing email and phone, along with instant messaging and text messages are becoming more and more commonplace. In fact, social media, web, and digital media account for the highest volumes and fastest growth of user-created data on the internet, only surpassed by machine-created data. So, how do you manage all this online data? You are, after all, dealing with big data. There's a lot of it. It changes fast. There's many different sources. How do you know if it's true? Let alone, how do you know if it's important to you and has value? And online data sources really require a new mindset. Currently, we're still dealing with online data using old systems to store new types of conversations. Combing through email attachments in an archive can be a painful way to locate images relevant to your case. This takes time, extra storage capacity, and as I said earlier, searching for online data formats via old access type databases really isn't manageable. It takes time, and the metadata tags might not line up. So it creates a problem for review and visibility. And a major challenge for everyone is that when it comes to online data, well, the data exists online. So you may or may not have control over it. You may or may not even own that data. So now let's talk about what to do about all this and how to make handling data online easier. You can start by using native formats when possible. While there are a number of reasons for this, I like to sum it up with the analogy that a print is not the same as an original painting. Paintings have a three-dimensional element with texture that can be seen and felt. That's almost like the metadata. You can feel the space it takes up in a room, not just from what you see in the image. Like metadata from native formats does the same thing by giving you that extra sense, that information that could help you put electronic evidence in a different context. Using native formats can also help reveal proper conversational context, because modern dialogue, especially online, is wrought with emojis, multimedia, and is full of concurrent conversations. Now, explain to me how any of that comes through in a CSV file or in a simple email. So what do you do to capture all that and with online data? The next thing I recommend is, and this might freak a lot of people out, but capture an entire site. Capturing entire sites and feeds, or as close to this as you can, gives you ownership of the data. Websites and other online data aren't chronological like pages in a book. They're actually a nexus of content that can be navigated in any order through links, videos, watching, and a lot of different buttons. Some have paywalls that you might need to get through, or sorry, forms to fill out. So there are now tools out there that will enable you to capture full websites and full social media pages in their entirety and replay them live. Of course, Page Freezer is one of them, but you'd have to check to see whether all of the tools also include letting you capture media like GIFs and video. This is just a screenshot, but if you go to the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine, you can replay entire sites from like upwards of 30 years ago. This here we're looking at is a MySpace page from September 30th, 2007. And it shows you the native format. If you were to actually go to this site, you can click on all these links and watch the videos and fill out that member login. Most importantly, by capturing and collecting a website or URL, again, you are taking control of that data by storing it as a record in your own archives in your records management tool. So you've taken it from the internet, tagged it with your metadata, and put it into your records tools. And once you've captured a site or feed, you don't need to capture it every day. Right? You can maintain the capture by tracking changes. Websites change content here and there. Social media posts can be edited or deleted rapidly, and by capturing these types of changes, you can improve the truth in your data, and you can keep your data storage costs low because everything is really just a marginal change in what's happening. Also, I'd like to know if anybody here has found the 5 changes between these 2 pictures. Yeah. Also, live video and ephemeral discussions. So, real-time capture. Live video and ephemeral discussions are the norm, yet largely go unrecorded. Online content changes rapidly and can do damage in an instant. Instant message apps continue to proliferate. And internal messaging, as I had mentioned earlier, is slowly replacing email. And the speed of all these changes that happen on the sites that you capture are hard to keep up with. So working with a tool that strives for real-time capture or as close to it as you can get will really alleviate the worry of capturing or missing details that you would otherwise forego or typically have in dormant emails or documents. And when it comes to online data, metadata matters. For a lot of people here, you probably thought about this and you know this already, but the general rule is that the more complex and interactive a computer program, the more likely metadata will help us understand what the program did or the users did in relation to each other and each piece of data or file. Now, with online platforms, nothing gets more complex and interactive than these online social media and websites that we use this day and age. So now that you've captured this data for your records, you can also ensure it has the best value to you by capturing the metadata that's available and adding the relevant data, the data that's relevant to you into your system. And with all the data that you're working with, having a good system for metadata will also enable you to retrieve required information from these volumes of data. You can retrieve it faster and easier, more systematically. Now, I hope this goes without saying, but own your tools and own your data. With a culture of using a lot of legal consultants and forensic consultants, there are a lot of organizations out there that don't actually have tools to gather their own data. And this puts you in an awkward position because it will not let you have the strongest case. Whereas, for small monthly fees or for limited subscriptions, you can keep control of the data and just take a little time, spend a little money early on to prevent all that pain later on with consultants and legal fees. So, perhaps you have a trial or a free tool that lets you capture your website before you retire it, for example, and then move to a new provider. If you don't own your tool, you can't guarantee that you'll have captured everything on that site with the video or anything behind a limited number of pages. And then also, if you were on a trial or using a freebie, once that expires, your data might get encrypted and you won't have access to it when you need it. The important thing about making the data yours is the portability. You want to make sure you can use that data when and how you need it. And most importantly, that agreements you have with your vendors for this data give you access to your records once you part ways with that vendor. What's the point of capturing 5 years worth of data with a vendor if it's proprietary to them and you can't take it or they delete it when you need it? Okay. Lastly, speaking of vendors, communicate with them. Vendors know their tools, they can provide great guidance, and they're there to help you. Discovery on specific types of data may not happen frequently, and so you might not need to retrieve those pieces of data very often. Or maybe you have a change of staff. Keep your vendor in the loop with the changes in your team and any upcoming legal requests so that they know how to prepare you, because they know their tool best and will help you when the time comes. Make it easier for them to help by giving them a heads up, because they have deadlines too, and last-minute requests might incur unnecessary hassles. So, as a quick review, these proven best practices: capture entire sites for replay and review. Use the native format so that you're giving as close to an original story as possible. Reduce your storage costs by monitoring changes instead of replicating entire sites all the time. And aim for real-time capture because the changes happen fast and often. And capture the metadata. Prove the veracity and the value of the data you're capturing by putting metadata on everything. Again, own your tools, own your data so that you can keep it portable. And then lastly, communicate with your vendors. So with that, I hope I've helped everybody have some insight into how to take your online records from being reactive and stressful to something proactive and give you confidence in moving forward, ready to discover the truth and protect what matters in your organization. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and that concludes my portion of the webinar. A little bit about Page Freezer. As Matthew had mentioned earlier, we are we provide permanent defensible records of website, social media, text message, enterprise collaboration content, and other unstructured data for real-time archiving, monitoring, legal e-discovery, and retention scheduling. We've got over 100,000 social media accounts captured and are a foundation proven and trusted by governments and global enterprise customers in verticals around the world. We are ISO 27001 certified, SOC 2 compliant, and have a comprehensive solution that encompasses your unstructured data needs. So, thank you very much, and I'll pass it over back to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Gabby. Greatly appreciate it. For everyone on the webinar, you should see a poll show up on your screen. If everyone would take a quick second and just go through and answer those questions, I think it'll be really informative for everyone on the call for us to take a look at those results as a group. Again, your answers will be anonymous. We'll just be able to see the percentages. But while we wait for everyone to go ahead and answer that poll, I do have a couple of questions here for you, Gabby. The first one is, how do you suggest handling collections of data that you don't have permission to access?
Well, that's always a tricky question, Matthew. Thank you. Because the one thing you can do, there are a lot of tools out there that will let you, again, scrape or crawl the entire site and attach your own metadata to it. So that's the basic strategy to capture data that isn't yours or that you might not have the user permissions to capture. Most tools that require API require you to have the user authentication, but if it's public information, I would recommend just crawling it straight off the website. As I said, capture the whole site and what's publicly visible, and as long as you attach the metadata to it, that can help. Gotcha.
The second question I have is, I've used screenshots in the past and they were considered okay. What has changed?
There have been, unfortunately, I don't have the cases right in front of me, but there are specific regulations now that came out of some recent case law, where the SEC, for example, will now specifically request actual websites or actual data that actual evidence that has metadata attached to it. And that's because the screenshots themselves can, sometimes can be doctored, or depending on what the context of the case is, they have just proven not to be enough. In particular, with websites, with web-based data, again, web information is dynamic. There may be tabs that are showing one piece of information and a link that you want to click through, and the screenshots don't let you do that. More importantly, the screenshots just simply take a lot of time, and linking through all the different pages and capturing the screenshots and showing what that experience navigating the website doesn't do the trick in a lot of instances.
Gotcha. The third question is, our litigation team outsources all things EDiscovery. How do you recommend a records manager coordinate with outsourced vendors?
Oh, well, I think with outsourced vendors, there's a great way to use your tool and give them guest access to the tool that you have. If you have a tool where you've got a good support contract, I would put the outsourced vendor in touch with the support for your vendor. That's one option. Two, you can give them, like PageFreezer has what we call a public access portal. So instead of emailing them files or sending something into their tools, you can just give them an HTML link or URL that they can access all the records that you've captured and what you've permitted them to access with user controls. So yeah, I think you just, by giving the outside vendor access, that will really help your workload get reduced.
Okay. The last question I have here is, you mentioned websites, but why wouldn't we just pull the backups from our website provider?
Oh, that's a great question, and one we get quite often. And usually I will just ask the website provider, so if I needed to pull the website on a particular day 3 years ago, can they do that? And the answer is always no, they can't, because they will, well, first they'll say yes, but what they're actually doing is they're giving you a replication of the website that they created, not how the website exactly looked on any particular day. So especially if it's an interactive website, if there were comments on that website on a particular day, the backups won't bring that up. So the backups themselves also might not be versioned, so you don't see the different versions and the changes. The website provider might not be managing the content in the website. They might just be managing the structure of the website. So there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to capture the website from the web. You want to see how it's been seen.
Okay, that makes sense. Makes sense. That is all the questions we have submitted thus far. Again, if anyone has any that come to mind, please use the Q&A button and we'll answer those. But I think we should take a look at the poll results. So let's pull that up real quick and we can see we have some respondents here. The first question we had was, what pains are you currently experiencing with your records management process? The 50% there is the inability to apply policies across multiple systems, and then followed closely by difficulty finding records in a timely manner, and then defensibility of retained documents as records. The first 50% there, I think that's a very common one that we at Gimel see very often. That is what our platform addresses, is the ability to manage those records across multiple platforms simultaneously. We see that being a bigger need as we definitely continue to push forward in this cloud era with multiple content sources. Many organizations are not just using SharePoint or not just using Office 365 anymore. So that is what Gimel really, at its heart and soul, that is what our platform addresses. I don't know if this is similar to what you guys are seeing over at PageFreezer, Gabby.
Yeah, I think this defensibility is one that we come across, and finding the records in a difficult in a timely manner is something that we find also, because again, I mean, if they're using screenshots, just trying to find a particular image in a screenshot across, across how many volumes of how many bits and bytes is extremely difficult. And I've seen legal teams just really looking for one piece of data, scrolling through websites, when if they had a good search tool, they would be able to find it really quickly.
Right. Right, 100% agree. The second question we have there is, which of the below technologies does your organization use? Now, far in the lead is something we often see is SharePoint, but then we get a tie between file shares, SAP, OneDrive, and others. SharePoint, we kind of group together with SharePoint or Office 365. Most organizations are using one or the other, or they're looking to migrate from on-premise SharePoint to Office 365. And that's generally something that we're accustomed to, is most organizations are using Microsoft and something else. It's always Office 365 and then something else. That's why we always see that SharePoint is always fairly in the lead. Gimel originally was definitely very heavy into the SharePoint, and then we started to break out with our platform and addressing things like file shares, things like SAP, OneDrive, Box, Documentum. We address all of those different repositories as well in conjunction with SharePoint. I'm not sure if that's a similar thing that you're seeing over at PageFreezer as well, if you're running into those content repositories a lot.
Well, at PageFreezer, we primarily work with online-based communication types. So I mean, SharePoint is something that we get asked a lot. In our case, we'd be able to capture the SharePoint site and what's on it and the communications on it. But the structures of SharePoint are more traditional ESI based, so there are a lot of documents and things in there that we would use Gimel for capturing. So we're more focused on that dynamic type of data that's constantly changing.
Right. The third question is, for which of the below data sources are you currently able to effectively manage content? The one we have in the lead there, surprisingly, is email. And I'm going to just go out on a limb and think that it's probably because of the native retention functionality in things like Outlook. That makes it easy for them to just kind of set and forget in managing that email content. But then followed closely by website and archives. Website, I think that's appropriate. Archives, I think that is actually the first time we've seen archives and website come into a tie. I'm just really kind of shocked about the 0% on the text messaging, on the social media. It's just the fact that they're not able. It's either, I wish we kind of structured this a little differently to see that 0% they're not managing effectively now. Is this something that you're seeing fairly often, Gabby? Is that, a lot of social media platforms, they're just not managing that content effectively?
That's correct. With social media, what we're finding right now is when it comes to large organizations, their tendency is to say that we'll just try and get that information from the platform vendor, whether it be Facebook or Twitter, when they need it. And for an organization like Facebook or Twitter, you have to realize that you're not the only one asking for that information. So it can take a few months to get that information. By that time, it could be, your case could be over or, settled. The early case assessment may have said, oh, we don't have a good storyline there. Others will, again, use screenshots, which then they can't prove necessarily this is what was exactly said when and in what context. So social media, we do see a lot of struggles with that. With text messaging, this one is interesting because this has been becoming really popular, and we've had a lot of requests for how to capture text messages, in particular with high value interactions, for high dollar value salespeople, things like that, or freedom of information requests. These text messages seem to have more and more value in legal proceedings and information requests. Mm-hmm. So yeah, these are things that are new and are seem to be becoming more and more popular.
Great. Last question we have there on the poll is, how often does your organization rely primarily on end users to supply metadata to digital content? 50% there say usually, and then we have a tie for 25% say always or sometimes. This is a major problem at Gimel that we see that we try to address, is taking that end user burden out of supplying metadata to content. Usually, really classifying and supplying that metadata is really outside of a general end user's business process. They might not know how to do it correctly. They might not know what the correct classification rules are or what the correct metadata is. And if they do it, generally sometimes they'll do it wrong, or they just won't do it at all, or they may just forget just purely on accident. So the Gimel platform really focuses on addressing that issue and trying to the best of its ability to automate those steps to ensure that your end user doesn't have to burden themselves with supplying that metadata. But 50% it usually, actually, we usually see a good number there on the never. I think that's actually the biggest percentage we've seen on the usually column. Gabby, do you want to address this at all either?
Well, we at PageFreezer, we find that metadata is important and should be tied. One, it should be tied to the piece of data, not to really necessarily the user, unless they're the custodian, in which case you're really putting metadata around the custodian. The post, let's say like the post or the video, we automatically create that metadata, take that information, then send it to the records management system, which we recommend also then adds their system of metadata to it. Keeping things in the end user's hands is difficult because you're asking more people to contribute to a system, and thereby increasing the amount of faults that could happen in the metadata. So the more automated you can do that, I agree. I think that's what you want to do with metadata, and why we recommended it that way as a best practice.
Great. Yep, 100% agree. So that's all the questions. That's all the poll questions we had. I think we'll conclude today's session. We'll give everyone back 17 minutes to their workday. Gabby, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, PageFreezer, for coming out. We really do appreciate you joining the webinar with us. Thank you for everyone for attending. If you have any questions for PageFreezer, please feel free to visit their website, or you can email Gabby directly at gabby@pagefreezer.com. If you have any questions for Gimel, you can contact us at info@gimel.com, or again, you can visit our website directly and just fill out a contact us form, and we can hop on a very quick call. So with that, thank you, Gabby. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we hope you join us again.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Gimel. Thank you, everybody.